Hey there, Wargamers. Austin here with Death Ray Designs, and here on the 10th day of Christmas, we're going to talk about tiny posters. So one of the things that's honestly missing from a lot of terrain pieces is little details that help make it believable as something that people that are this tall are going to be interacting with. A lot of times you'll see text on tons of things, you'll see graphics and logos and all kinds of advertisements just sprawling across everything in a modern, much less a science fiction city of the future. So in today's episode, we're going to be taking some teeny tiny little posters that we've made and apply them to a piece of terrain. The posters that we're going to be using are some that we've designed in-house, and you can use them at home too. All you got to do is print them out. We recommend that you print them with a laser printer as opposed to an ink printer, because some of the stuff we're going to be doing requires water or water-based glue, which will dissolve the ink and it'll be a fuzzy mess. You can download and print those off at the link in the description below. So the first thing we're going to do is select a handful of the smaller posters for a section where we're going to put a handful of them sort of overlapping. So let's pick the Enlist Now one in this size. We're just going to use a ruler to make sure that we get nice clean edges. And it's okay to take off just a tiny little sliver on each side of it, as long as you don't leave a white border. There'll probably be some white paper showing at the edges, but you can always sort of finish that up with a little bit of paint if you really feel compelled to. Okay, so there's one teeny tiny poster ready to go, and we'll pick out a couple more and then we'll get to gluing. So now that we've selected 3 of our posters here, we're going to apply them to one of the walls on our building. And I want to get them overlapped like it looks more organic and like people have put them up over time. So somebody slaps one up and then maybe somebody else comes behind them and doesn't care about that other poster. They slaps one up that's kind of overlapping that one. I think that looks best and looks most like it would in some sort of metropolitan area. So let's start with one of the larger ones. We've got our Fight Fire with Fire poster, and we're just going to dip it in the water here. And this is why I recommended that you not use inkjet printers. You could always just take the file to Kinko's or Staples or wherever, but getting this wet really helps make it a bit more pliable. If you're having these printed somewhere, these are printed on 28-pound paper. So we found that that was the optimal paper weight for this type of thing. So I'm just going to try to get these all soaked up. And getting them wet is just making them a little bit more pliable, so that if we want them to contour around elements, they will much more easily now. And we're going to use a water-based glue, though if you're in a hurry, you could just slap these on with some super glue, but that doesn't necessarily make for an interesting demonstration. So we've got some tacky glue, and we're going to add a little bit to the top of our lid here. We're going to mix some of that with a little bit of water, so just a couple of brushfuls of water just to thin it down some. And if you're doing a giant area, you could apply it straight to the terrain, but I'm going to do it on the back of this just because I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to put it first. So we're just putting a little bit of glue on the back here. You don't have to worry about getting tons and tons and tons. The paper will adhere to the surface really well. Just the glue will bind to that open grain of the paper really easily. So we're going to sort of drop this in place here, and we've got it overlapping this now. So this is where that soaking process really comes into play. You can kind of get it to squish down over that like it's gotten rained on a bunch. Heck, maybe it's torn a little bit at one edge. This is still very clean looking, but you've got it kind of contouring over there. So there's one poster down, and we don't even really have a white border that you can see as far as the edge of the paper goes, so that's looking nice. So let's throw another one on there. We've got our Resist poster. I'm going to peel that guy up and add some glue. And then let's have it overlapping here. We're just going to kind of have it up and over like so. And I like having them kind of at an angle, not too crazy of an angle. You can also come in here with your brush. If you didn't like this angle, you can get your bristles underneath it. Remember, the glue is going to dry clear, so not a big deal. Same way that you might move a decal around, you can kind of get your bristles under it and scooch it around as you need. So there we go. Okay. Oh, still moved it. Okay, cool. And then last, let's put our little tiny Enlist Today poster down here in the bottom. Maybe it'll be covering up the width in Fight Fire with Fire. So you can see this is a really simple process. We've not really spent a whole lot of time with it, and as long as you've got decent images to do this with, you can make your own posters of anything. Come up with your own custom factions, make posters for them, like enlistment campaign stuff, and you really can add a great flair to your terrain really fast and easy. This is still pretty clean. These look like they've not been there for too terrible long. Maybe they've gotten rained on a little bit, but they're still pretty much intact. So let's say that you wanted to have a poster up that looked absolutely ragged and tattered and destroyed, like it's been hanging there for months and months and months. It's been abused, it's been torn down and stuck back up a bunch of times. So let's do that with another piece. So we've got our larger Explorer poster cut out and ready to go. So we're going to start the process the same way that we did before. We're going to dip this in some water, make sure that we get it nice and saturated. We want to have this one really pliable because we're going to do some horrible things to it. We're going to basically crumple this thing up. Imagine this is a poster that's been abused, thrown on the ground, kicked around, rained on, stuck back up a couple of times. We really want to really mess this poster up a bit. Now, what we can do in here in the middle to accentuate some of the creases, you can kind of tear away little bits and pieces so that you see some of the paper now through it. You could even tear away a whole corner. So like maybe it was tacked up. Ooh, not that much. It's okay, but we don't want to remove quite that much. Okay, so we've torn a little corner off here. Maybe we'll tear off another corner, maybe take away a little piece of the lettering at the top. Let's get part of that E. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Maybe we have just a little corner tear at the bottom, so it's not like torn off, but we've got some little pieces showing through. So I'm liking how this is looking now. It's pretty beat up and ragged. Now one thing that's going to be different about the way that we do this is I don't want to lay it down completely flat. Like a lot of old school posters and things that were put up with paste, they tended to have wrinkles and stuff in them, and I kind of like that look for this. The story that I am sort of creating in my head for this building is that we've got all these nice new posters. We got Resist, we got Enlist, we got Fight Fire with Fire, and that's great. But maybe this is a brand new conflict, and before it was more, hey, go out and explore and do cool things. But that's a time of the past now. And so exploration is not at a premium anymore. So let's flip this over and get some glue on it. So we're gonna get a nice layer. Okay, it might be a little thick there. Okay. All right. So let's find our placement. We're gonna try to get this mostly centered here, but I'm also going to try to crumple this up just a touch. Okay, so we got some nice little wrinkles going here. That corner doesn't have enough glue under it because it's not sticking. So I'm just going to take my brush, I'm going to get under that and add a little more. You just don't want that sticking up too much. So maybe we even have the top sort of falling down, folded over. Let's just make sure that it's not a tearing hazard for later. If you really wanted to, you could put a little bit of glue on top of it. It's going to look a little bit white right now, but it's going to help strengthen it later once it dries. So doing this now is going to ensure that this stuff doesn't just completely fall off as soon as you start playing on it. Okay, there we go. So let's give that just a minute to dry and we'll see what we got. Now that the glue's dried, you can see we've still got some of the wrinkles and stuff. It's a little hard to tell, but there's definitely a texture of wrinkles here, which is something that we want to capitalize on. In a lot of posters and printed materials, when you start folding and creasing, you're going to break the toner or whatever the top layer ink is, and you're going to start to see some of the paper through it. So creases on paper are usually going to yield some sort of little fine white lines. So because we've taken the time to make these wrinkles and creases in here, and they're definitely a 3D texture, we want to accentuate that a little bit. We're going to take some ivory. This is a Vallejo model color. I just don't want to use straight white because we want this to look a little bit dingy and a little bit dirty, and we're going to dry brush very, very lightly over our poster, just trying to catch those little wrinkles and edges. So let's do that real quick. We're going to try to knock off as much paint as we can here. We only want sort of the faintest touch here. We're going to kind of feel where our wrinkles are, and they're mostly going right to left, so we're going to go up and down to try to catch those without adding a whole lot of paint anywhere else. Looks like we probably need to rub a little more off there. Okay. Okay, so you can see a little line forming there. We're going to try to really focus where we're putting this, just so we're not adding tons and tons and tons of unnecessary paint on here. Okay. If you do get a couple little regions where it's a little bit lighter, that kind of cracking in the surface can end up being basically just regions of the toner or ink or whatever being a little bit faded because more of it's been chipping off. Let's see if we can get a little up top here too, maybe on some of those edges. There we go. I think that's looking pretty good, and I don't want to overdo it, so that's where we're going to stop for now. Now, if you did want to do more and make this look even more layered, more weathered, more ruined, you could come up here where we've got some chipping and do some little rust drips and things using brown or yellow or orange washes to kind of make rust water drips. And that could really help sort of incorporate this piece into the terrain that it's on. Especially with ones that are supposed to look so old and weathered, I think that that would be a really great thing to add onto your posters. Whereas ones that are more like these are brand new, maybe they don't have a whole lot of weathering, they've not been sitting out in the sun for forever, and they look a bit fresher and newer. And with that, we've got some really cool posters on our terrain. It doesn't take very long at all. The process is super easy, and if it's something that you'd like to try, there's no reason not to give it a shot. Definitely check out the link in the description below so you can download the file and print it yourself. Like we said before, we really recommend doing it on a laser printer and not an inkjet, just because you can't use any of the water techniques. It'll just make all the ink bleed. But you can always take them to some office shop and have it printed for yourself. And we've printed up a whole bunch of these, so the next couple hundred orders are going to have a free copy of the posters in the package. So speaking of products, definitely check out deathraydesigns.com/12days. We have all the products that we're using in the 12 Days series tutorials up there, and they're on special pricing till the end of the event. So since we're getting close to the end, go check it out while they're still on sale. Definitely check us out tomorrow. We'll have another tutorial up then. And until next time, happy wargaming.